Okay, so for Chapter 9, there's two pretty big calculator skills that are going to help you out, and I want to go over what they both look like. And I'm going to use one of the my stat lab homework assignment problems or as sort of the backdrop so we can see how this works. So it's find the equation of the regression line given the data. That's one of the things we're going to be able to do. We also want to be able to make a scatter plot and calculate correlation coefficient and the coefficient of determination, or R squared. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open up my calculator app so you can see what I'm working with my calculator. Before I attempt to really do any of this, there's some things going on inside of the calculator that will be helpful for you to turn on. If you want your calculator to calculate R and R squared and all that fun stuff, you have to turn on a diagnostic button. Okay, so I'm going to go through that kind of slow here so you can see how to find this on your calculator. So I'm going to use the second key and the 0. Okay, the quickest way to get to this command is through the catalog, at least as far as I know. So I'm going to hit second and 0 for my catalog. Okay, because you can see the catalog is just alphabetical. So if you want to quickly hop down to the D's, which is where I want to get to, then you can just press alpha and X inverse, alpha and the D letter. Oops, maybe not. There we go, now it's on. D, yeah, so it'll jump me down to the D's. So it saves you a little bit of time. And then what you're going to do is arrow down, and you can arrow all the way down from the top, arrow through the A's, B's, and C's, but you can jump down to D if you want to use it. So here's the command I want. It's called diagnostic on. So when I find it, and I have my arrow on it, basically I'm going to have to press enter twice. Okay, so I pressed enter once. Now I press enter again. And once it says done, that means that it executed the command diagnostic on. So really doesn't look like anything important has happened, but trust me, it has. Now when we do our linear regression and that fun stuff, we'll get values of R and R squared like we want. Okay, so to revisit the problem again that we want to do, I want to get these points and I want to make a scatter plot of them, and I also want to calculate the least squares regression line. Okay, I can do both of those on the calculator. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I've already done this, is I'm going to enter those numbers in my calculator. So this is the same as it's been since week 2. You're going to hit stat and you're going to select edit. So we press stat and enter, and we're in edit. So I've already gone ahead and entered these in my stat editor, but you would enter your two lists. X is usually to the left and the Y is to the right. Usually it's set up that way for you. Okay, so now my calculator is aware of these numeric values, so I'd like to tell it to make a scatter plot. All right, so just like when we made histograms last week, or box plots, this is going to be under second y equals. Right, if you see in blue stat plot command, that's how you turn on your statistical plots. Right? So you can see right now from me previously working on this, it looks like a box plot option is turned on plot 1. All the other plots are off, so that's fine. So I'm going to press enter on plot 1. But I don't want the box plot. What I have now is 2 variable data. So I do want on to be highlighted. I'm going to arrow down. And the very first option of a plot that I always have here is the scatter plot. So now watch what happens when I press enter and select scatter plot. Right away the calculator knows, like, oh hey, you need 2 lists. You need an X list and a Y list. Okay? So I'm fine with this whole menu here. So this is where I arrow to the next menu. I'm fine with L1 as my X list. That's going to be good. And then I'm fine with, or the Y list is going to be L2. So I don't want this residual list written out in here. What I want is L2. So remember, you're not just going to type in the letter L. If you look over on your keypad, you notice L2 is written in blue above the number 2. So I'm going to hit second and the number 2, and that replaces that residual list with L2. Okay? So now what we're going to use is a shortcut to get our window. We don't have to be real. We did this with the box plot. We don't have to be real picky about our window. We can let the calculator do the heavy lifting for us. And the shortcut for that is the same as it was for the box plot. It's zoom and 9. Now, if you get this funky menu down here like I just did, just quit. Hit second, quit, okay? And then just do zoom 9 again. I still don't know why that menu pops up every once in a while. So right away I can see my scatter plot. I can also kind of see that it looks like this scatter plot is not really linear. It looks like there's sort of a bending or curve pattern in it. But I would definitely say that it suggests that there's a positive association between the two variables, which are height and stories. So, if we want the slope of the least squares line, we know it's going to be a positive number. We know also right away that r is going to be positive. And then we can let the calculator calculate those values for us. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to do, is make a scatter plot. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to second quit and go home, second mode. So now, just like we did with one variable data, we have stat and edit, but we also have stat and calculate. Okay, so I go up to stat. I'm going to right arrow over to calculate. Okay, and you have a couple different options for the linear regression. If you are used to, let me see what your textbook authors do, just so we know. Yeah, it looks like they're putting the slope first. They have, y hat equals the slope times x plus the y-intercept. So we'll just go along with that. Some statistics courses put the y-intercept first and then the slope in x. But we'll just go with this linear regression number 4 here, ax plus b. So whatever the calculator tells us is our a value, that's going to be the slope of the least squares line. And the b value will be the y-intercept. So you can press 4 or you can arrow down to it. And again, notice what it asks for, L1 and L2. It also gives me an option, if I would like, to store the regression equation. In other words, what if we want to graph the regression equation on our scatter plot? We can do that. All right. So I'll go slow, but you can pause and rewind if you need to. There's a few moving pieces to this. Y1, which is where we would graph the equation least squares line, is a variable. So that's why I go to my variables key. So this vars key. So I'm going to hit vars. Okay. I'm going to go over to the y variables. Okay. And I'm going to select function. This is a function menu. And then there's y1. And now we can just hit enter. Okay. Those of you that have an older calculator, maybe you don't get this menu, that's fine. Your screen is just going to read linear regression, and then you're going to hit second and then number 1 for L1. You're going to hit a comma, and then second and then number 2 for L2, and then another comma, and then you're going to follow those steps I just gave you for vars and y vars. If you're not quite following along, I'll show you what I mean, but we did it last week. So now when I press calculate, okay, enter, I have my slope of my least squares line. I have the y-intercept. And because we turned the diagnostic on, we have r and r squared. And check it out. The calculator did me the extra favor of going ahead and graphing that least squares regression line on my calculator window. Okay. So for folks that your calculator is a little bit older and doesn't work that way, what I was suggesting was that your screen should have looked like this. Linear regression, you're going to have to, that'll come up and you're going to have to tell it L1, right? You do that by pressing second and then number 1, a comma, second and then number 2 for L2, and then you go on that same Easter egg hunt that I just showed you to find Y1. I'll go back and delete it and do it again if you want to see it. Okay, so we have L1, comma, L2, comma. You're going to hit the variables key. You're going to go to Y variables, function, and Y1. Okay, and you'll get all the same fun stuff. So this is mostly what you're going to need the calculator to do for you in Chapter 9. The rest of what we're doing is really conceptual, understanding the concept of what a residual is, right? Understanding what the correlation coefficient R means, understanding what R squared means. Okay, those are terms and definitions and concepts that you're going to have to commit to memory.